The email arrived at 4:47 p.m. on a Friday, 3 minutes before the weekend. 3 minutes before I would have closed my laptop and walked out the door, oblivious to the bomb that was about to detonate in my life. Subject line, meeting request, HR conference room, 5 p.m. today. Sender, Martin Dowell, VP of Human Resources at Helix Dynamics. My stomach dropped as if I'd just plummeted down the first hill of a roller coaster. In my 7 years at Helix, I'd never received a Friday evening HR meeting request. Nobody had. It was an unwritten rule that bad news wasn't delivered on Fridays, supposedly to give employees time to process changes before the weekend. I guess some rules are made to be broken. 13 minutes later, I sat stone-faced across from Martin and my boss, Diane Frost, as they explained that due to necessary budget reallocations and strategic restructuring initiatives, my position as senior project manager was being eliminated, effective immediately. This is in no way a reflection of your performance, Claire, Diane said, not quite meeting my eyes. You've been an exceptional employee. Unfortunately, these decisions are purely financial. I nodded mechanically, my mind racing to process what was happening while simultaneously trying to maintain my composure. 7 years of late nights, canceled vacations, and missed family events, all for a company that could discard me with a 13-minute notice. Of course, we'll provide a severance package, Martin continued, sliding a folder across the table. 2 months' salary, continuation of benefits for 60 days, and outplacement services. As I signed the termination documents, I noticed Diane checking her watch. Probably late for her dinner reservation. I wondered if she'd ordered champagne to celebrate getting rid of me and my inconveniently high salary. Little did they know, I wasn't just any employee they could discard. I was Claire Reynolds, the woman who had single-handedly saved their biggest account last year when everyone else had given up. I was the one who stayed until 3 a.m. for weeks, debugging their failed system migration. I was the one who knew where all the bodies were buried, figuratively speaking, of course. They also didn't know that I had evidence of what was really happening at Helix Dynamics. Evidence that would prove my termination had nothing to do with budget cuts. As I packed my belongings into a cardboard box while a security guard hovered nearby, a final indignity, I made a silent promise to myself. This wouldn't be the last they'd hear from Claire Reynolds, not by a long shot. They thought they were cutting costs by letting me go. Instead, they'd just made the most expensive mistake of their lives. I didn't cry until I got home. My apartment felt especially empty that night. I'd never noticed how the silence seemed to press against my eardrums like I was deep underwater. I poured myself a generous glass of wine and sat on my balcony, staring at the city lights while my mind replayed the day's events on an endless loop. The cardboard box containing my office belongings sat unopened by the door. I couldn't bear to look at it yet. The family photos, the award plaques, the silly little desk toys that had kept me company during countless late nights. My phone buzzed with messages from colleagues who had heard the news. Most expressed shock and sympathy. A few offered to connect me with recruiters. One, from my friend Natalie in marketing, simply said, "This is bullshit. Call me." I didn't call anyone. I wasn't ready to talk about it. To say the words out loud, "I was fired," would make it real in a way I wasn't prepared to face. Instead, I opened my laptop and navigated to my personal email. There, waiting in my inbox, was an email I'd sent to myself a month ago. Subject line, insurance. Attachment, HD evidence, zip. I wasn't being paranoid when I'd sent it. I was being prepared. Because a month ago, I'd noticed something strange in the company's project management system. Anomalies in the budget allocations. Resources being diverted from successful projects to failing ones. And most suspicious of all, a new project code that seemed to be siphoning funds but had no deliverables attached to it. When I'd asked Diane about it, she'd dismissed my concerns. "It's just an accounting adjustment," she'd said. "Nothing to worry about." But I'd worked in project management long enough to know when something didn't add up, so I documented everything, screenshots, spreadsheets, email threads. all carefully organized and encrypted in the file I was now staring at. I closed the laptop without opening the attachment. Not tonight. Tonight was for grieving, for acknowledging the loss of a job I'd poured my heart and soul into for 7 years. Tomorrow would be for planning. And the day after that? The day after that would be for revenge. I spent the next week in a haze of job applications and networking calls. On the surface, I was doing everything a recently unemployed professional should do. I updated my LinkedIn profile, reached out to my industry contacts, and even signed up for a webinar on bouncing back after job loss. But beneath this veneer of productivity, I was methodically preparing for something else entirely. Each night, after spending the day on my job search, I would open the HD evidence zip file and continue my investigation. What had started as financial anomalies was revealing itself to be something much bigger and much more illegal. Helix Dynamics specialized in developing software solutions for healthcare providers. Their flagship product, Patient Path, was used by hospitals across the country to manage patient data and optimize care workflows. It was a successful product with an impressive client list. But according to the documents I'd collected, someone at Helix was deliberately introducing security vulnerabilities into the Patient Path software. Backdoors that could potentially expose sensitive patient information. Worse, they were selling access to these backdoors to third parties. The project code I discovered, Operation Backdoor, was where the money from these sales was being funneled. And based on the figures I was seeing, it was generating millions in off-the-books revenue. This wasn't just corporate malfeasance, this was a federal crime. As I dug deeper, I began to understand why I'd been fired so abruptly. 3 weeks ago, I'd been assigned to lead a security audit of Patient Path, a routine procedure required by one of our biggest clients, Memorial Healthcare System. The audit would have inevitably exposed the backdoors. I was fired because I was about to discover their secret. But they'd made a critical mistake in their haste to get rid of me. They hadn't revoked all my access credentials. My VPN access was still active, allowing me to connect to Helix's internal network. It was an oversight that would cost them dearly. On the 7th day after my termination, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Claire Reynolds," a woman's voice asked when I answered. "Yes, this is she." "My name is Tara Wilson. I'm the HR director at Meridian Solutions. Your resume was passed to me by one of our VPs, and I'd like to schedule an interview for next Tuesday if you're available." Meridian Solutions, one of Helix's biggest competitors. I felt a slow smile spread across my face. "Tuesday would be perfect, Ms. Wilson. Thank you for reaching out." As I hung up, a plan began to crystallize in my mind. I knew what I needed to do next. The Meridian Solutions office was housed in a sleek glass tower downtown, the kind of building that seemed to be made entirely of windows and stainless steel. As I rode the elevator to the 32nd floor, I smoothed down my Navy interview suit and took deep breaths to calm my nerves. This wasn't just any job interview. This was the next phase of my plan. Tara Wilson met me in the reception area. She was younger than I expected, maybe early 30s, with a sharp bob haircut and an even sharper gaze that seemed to be assessing everything about me. "Claire, welcome to Meridian," she said, extending her hand. "We're excited to meet with you today." The interview process was intense. 3 hours, 6 different people, and countless questions about my experience, my management style, and my technical expertise. I was prepared for all of it, having researched the company thoroughly and practiced my responses to common interview questions. What I wasn't prepared for was the final interviewer. "Claire, this is James Renner, our CEO," Tara said, ushering me into a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. James Renner was a legend in the healthcare software industry. He'd founded Meridian Solutions 15 years ago and had built it into one of the most respected names in the business. He was also known for his ethical approach to business, a stark contrast to what I discovered was happening at Helix. "Ms. Reynolds," he said, rising from behind his desk to shake my hand. "I've heard impressive things about your work at Helix Dynamics." "Thank you, Mr. Renner. It's an honor to meet you. Please, call me James. He gestured for me to take a seat. I must say, I was surprised when your resume crossed my desk. Helix has a reputation for taking good care of their top talent. I chose my words carefully. Let's just say that Helix's priorities have shifted recently. In ways that didn't align with my professional values. James leaned forward, his interest visibly piqued. Care to elaborate? I'd rather not speak ill of my former employer, I said, playing the part of the consummate professional. But I will say that I believe in creating software that helps healthcare providers deliver better care, not software that puts patients at risk. His eyes narrowed slightly. Puts patients at risk? That's a concerning statement. I nodded but said nothing more. The bait was dangled, now I needed to wait. After a few moments of silence, James leaned back in his chair. Well, Claire, based on your resume and the feedback from your earlier interviews, we'd like to offer you the position of Director of Project Management. It's a step up from your role at Helix, with a corresponding increase in compensation and responsibilities. My heart raced. This was exactly what I'd hoped for. I'm honored, James. But before I accept, I'd like to be completely transparent about something. He raised an eyebrow, waiting. I have information about Helix dynamics that I believe would be of significant interest to Meridian Solutions and potentially to federal regulators, information that could substantially change the competitive landscape in our industry. James's expression remained neutral, but I could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. I see. And may I ask what kind of information this is? Evidence of deliberate security vulnerabilities being introduced into PatientPath, Helix's flagship product, vulnerabilities that are being exploited for profit at the expense of patient privacy. His eyes widened almost imperceptibly. That's a serious allegation. Claire. I know. And I can prove it. James was silent for a long moment, his fingers steepled in front of him. Finally, he reached for his phone. Tara, could you come back in, please, and bring legal? 20 minutes later, I was sitting in a conference room with James, Tara, and Meridian's chief legal officer, a stern-looking woman named Victoria Perez. I'd shown them a small sample of the evidence I'd collected, enough to prove I wasn't bluffing, but not enough to give away everything. If what you're showing us is authentic, Victoria said, Helix Dynamics is violating numerous federal laws, including HIPAA. It's authentic, I assured her. And there's more. Much more. James looked at me with newfound respect. What exactly are you proposing, Claire? I'm proposing a mutually beneficial arrangement, I said. I accept your job offer. In return, I provide Meridian with all the evidence I've collected about Helix's activities. You use this information to approach Helix's clients and offer them a secure alternative to PatientPath. Meanwhile, an anonymous tip goes to the appropriate federal agencies about Helix's security breaches. And what do you get out of this, besides employment? Victoria asked. Ever the skeptical lawyer. I smiled. Justice. And the satisfaction of watching Helix Dynamics implode from a safe distance. There was a moment of silence as the three Meridian executives exchanged glances. We'll need to verify all of this information independently, James said finally. And there are legal and ethical considerations we need to discuss internally. Of course, I agreed. I wouldn't expect anything less. In the meantime, he continued, the job offer stands, regardless of what we decide about this other matter. I extended my hand. Then I accept. When would you like me to start? James took my hand, his grip firm. How does Monday sound? As I left Meridian Solutions that afternoon, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. Phase 1 of my plan was complete. I had secured a new position, a better position, at a respected company. Now it was time for Phase 2, destroying Helix Dynamics. My first few weeks at Meridian Solutions were a whirlwind of onboarding activities, team meetings, and deep dives into the company's project management methodologies. On the surface, I was the model new executive, eager to learn, quick to contribute, and careful not to step on any toes as I found my footing. Behind the scenes, however, I was working closely with Meridian's legal team and cybersecurity experts to verify and analyze the evidence I'd brought with me from Helix. The process was painstaking, with Victoria Perez insisting on triple-checking everything before taking any action. "If we're going to do this," she told me during one late-night strategy session, "we need to be absolutely certain our hands are clean. One misstep, and we could be the ones facing legal consequences instead of Helix." I understood her caution. What we were planning wasn't just a competitive move, it was potentially going to trigger a federal investigation into Helix dynamics. We needed to be meticulous. 3 weeks after I started at Meridian, Victoria called me into a meeting with James and the company's executive team. "We've verified everything," she announced. "The backdoors exist exactly where Claire said they would. And we've confirmed that patient data has been accessed through these vulnerabilities at multiple hospitals." James's expression was grim. "So we're proceeding?" Victoria nodded. "We've prepared an anonymous whistleblower report for the Office of Civil Rights at HHS, the FBI's Cyber Division, and the FTC. It will be submitted tomorrow morning." "And our client outreach strategy?" James asked, turning to the Chief Marketing Officer. "Ready to launch," the CMO confirmed. "We've identified Helix's top 20 clients and prepared tailored presentations for each, highlighting the security vulnerabilities in Patient Path and positioning Safeguard as the secure alternative." Safeguard was Meridian's competing product, similar to Patient Path in functionality, but with a stronger emphasis on security and compliance. It wasn't as feature-rich as Patient Path, which had given Helix the edge in sales for years. But in light of what we were about to reveal, those additional features would suddenly seem far less important compared to data security. "Claire," James said, turning to me, "you'll be leading the presentations to Memorial Healthcare System and University Hospital Network, Helix's 2 biggest clients. Your insider knowledge will be invaluable in addressing their specific concerns." I nodded, feeling a mixture of excitement and apprehension. This was what I'd wanted, a chance to directly impact Helix where it would hurt most. But I also knew that facing representatives from these hospitals would mean potentially encountering people who knew me from my time at Helix. People who might question my motives. "When do we start?" I asked. "The whistleblower report goes out tomorrow at 9 a.m., Victoria said. "We begin contacting clients at 10 a.m. By noon, we expect the news to start breaking in industry publications. By end of day, it should hit mainstream media." James looked around the table at his executive team. "This is a pivotal moment for Meridian Solutions. If we execute this correctly, we not only gain market share, we establish ourselves as the trusted name in healthcare data management. But we must remember that this isn't just about business. There are patients whose private information has been compromised. Our primary message needs to be about protecting them, not exploiting Helix's mistakes." Everyone nodded in agreement. Despite the obvious business opportunity, there was a genuine concern for the ethical implications of what Helix had done. As the meeting concluded, James asked me to stay behind. "Are you ready for this, Claire?" he asked once we were alone. "Tomorrow, your former colleagues will likely figure out where the leak came from. Some of them might feel betrayed." I thought about Diane, who had been my mentor before becoming my boss. About Martin from HR, who had always seemed kind until he'd handed me that termination notice. About the team I'd built and led for years. "They betrayed me first," I said simply. "And more importantly, they betrayed their clients and the patients whose data they were entrusted with." "I'm more than ready." James studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Just remember, this isn't about revenge. It's about doing the right thing." I smiled, not bothering to correct him, because while he might truly believe that, for me, it was about both. That night, I barely slept. I kept checking my phone, half expecting to see frantic messages from former colleagues who had somehow gotten wind of what was coming, but my screen remained notification-free. By morning, I felt like a coiled spring, tense with anticipation for what the day would bring. I dressed with particular care, choosing a crimson power suit that I'd never worn at Helix. Today wasn't just another workday. Today was the beginning of Helix Dynamics' end. I arrived at Meridian's offices at 8:30 a.m., well before our 9 a.m. deadline for submitting the whistleblower report. The executive floor was already buzzing with activity, with Victoria and her legal team making final checks on the documentation and the marketing department preparing their outreach materials. At precisely 9 a.m., Victoria hit send on the whistleblower report, dispatching it simultaneously to multiple federal agencies. The room fell silent for a moment, everyone seeming to hold their breath. "It's done," she said simply. And with those two words, the machine we had built over the past 3 weeks lurched into motion. The marketing team began making calls to schedule same-day meetings with Helix's clients. The PR team activated their media contacts, feeding them just enough information to get them asking questions. The sales team stood ready to follow up with any inbound inquiries that might result from the brewing storm. By 11 a.m., I was in a car with James and our Chief Technology Officer heading to Memorial Healthcare System for our first presentation. Memorial was Helix's oldest and largest client, representing nearly 20% of their annual revenue. Losing them would be a devastating blow. As our car navigated through midday traffic, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Natalie, my friend in Helix's marketing department. "What the hell is happening here? Feds just showed up. Rumor is it's about patient path security. Do you know anything about this?" I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. Part of me wanted to respond, to tell Natalie to get out while she could, that things were about to get much worse. But I couldn't risk compromising our strategy. I put my phone away without responding. When we arrived at Memorial, we were escorted directly to the boardroom, where the hospital's C-suite executives were waiting, their faces grave. News travels fast in healthcare IT circles, and it was clear they had already heard rumors. "Mr. Renner," the CEO of Memorial began, "I understand you have information about security issues with Patient Path, the system that currently houses all of our patient data." James nodded solemnly. "We do, Dr. Morris. And I'm afraid it's worse than you might have heard." He gestured to me. "This is Claire Reynolds, our new Director of Project Management. Until recently, she was a senior project manager at Helix Dynamics, where she discovered something deeply troubling." All eyes turned to me. This was my moment, the culmination of weeks of planning and years of building expertise and credibility in my field. "Dr. Morris, distinguished colleagues," I began, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "What I'm about to share with you will be disturbing, but you need to know the truth about the system that currently houses your patient's most sensitive information." For the next 30 minutes, I laid out the evidence, the deliberate backdoors, the unauthorized access, the cover-up. I showed them redacted documents, code snippets, and access logs, all pointing to a systematic effort to compromise patient data security for profit. The room grew increasingly tense as I spoke. I could see shock, anger, and betrayal flashing across the faces of Memorial's executives. These were medical professionals who had taken oaths to protect their patients. The idea that their technology partner had deliberately put those patients at risk was almost incomprehensible to them. When I finished my presentation, there was a moment of heavy silence. "How many patients?" Dr. Morris asked finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Based on the access logs we've analyzed," I replied, "we believe data from approximately 1.2 million patients may have been compromised across all affected healthcare systems. For Memorial specifically, we estimate around 230,000 patients." The chief medical officer put his head in his hands. "Dear God, we need to switch systems immediately," the CIO said, turning to Dr. Morris. "We can't continue using Patient Path knowing what we know now." Dr. Morris nodded grimly. "Mr. Renner, I assume Meridian has a solution to offer us?" James stepped forward smoothly. "We do. Our safeguard system can be deployed rapidly, with full data migration from Patient Path. We're prepared to offer emergency implementation services at cost, with enhanced security features at no additional charge for the first year." "At cost?" Dr. Morris raised an eyebrow. That's unusually generous. James met his gaze steadily. This isn't about profit, Dr. Morris. This is about protecting patients. We're making the same offer to all affected healthcare providers. It was a masterful approach, positioning Meridian as the white knight riding to the rescue rather than a competitor capitalizing on Helix's downfall. I had to admire James's strategic thinking, even as I recognized the calculated business decision behind it. By sacrificing short-term profit, Meridian would secure long-term contracts and an unassailable reputation for integrity. By the time we left Memorial 2 hours later, we had a signed letter of intent for a complete system transition, to begin immediately. The hospital's PR team was already drafting a patient notification about the data breach, carefully worded to emphasize that it was Helix, not Memorial, that had failed to protect their information. In the car back to Meridian's offices, James received call after call from other executives reporting similar successes with other Helix clients. The dominoes were falling, exactly as we had planned. My phone, meanwhile, was blowing up with messages from former colleagues at Helix. Some were panicked questions about what was happening. Others were angry accusations, as word had apparently spread that I might be involved in the whistleblowing. I ignored them all except one. A text from Diane Frost, my former boss. I know it was you, Claire. I hope you realize what you've done. This one, I answered. I do realize what I've done. Do you? When we arrived back at Meridian, the office was in a controlled frenzy. The story had broken wide open, with technology and healthcare news sites running headlines about the Helix Dynamics security scandal. Our PR team was fielding calls from major news outlets seeking comment, while the sales department was handling an influx of inquiries from anxious Helix clients looking for an alternative solution. James called an impromptu all-hands meeting to address the staff. Today marks a significant turning point for Meridian Solutions, he announced to the assembled employees. By this time tomorrow, we expect to have signed agreements with at least 15 former Helix clients. This represents an approximate 40% increase in our client base and a projected revenue growth of 60% over the next fiscal year. A cheer went up from the staff. James raised his hands for quiet. But I want to be very clear about something. We are not celebrating Helix's downfall. We are responding to a serious breach of trust that has put patient data at risk. Our priority must be to ensure a smooth transition for these healthcare providers and to restore security to their systems as quickly as possible. As the meeting dispersed, I felt a tap on my shoulder. It was Tara Wilson from HR. Quite a first month on the job, she remarked with a small smile. James is impressed. The executive team is talking about a special bonus for you, given your role in all this. That's not necessary, I said automatically, though the recognition felt good. I was just doing what needed to be done. Tara's expression turned serious. Be prepared for some backlash, Claire. When companies implode like this, people look for someone to blame. And given your unique position in all this, you're likely to be a target. I nodded, having already considered this. I can handle it. I'm sure you can, she agreed. Just know that Meridian has your back. Legal is prepared for any potential countersuits from Helix, though given the nature of their actions, we doubt they'll risk further scrutiny by coming after you directly. As Tara walked away, I checked my phone one more time. The text notifications had continued to pile up, but now there was also an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line, "You've made a terrible mistake." I opened it cautiously. Claire, you think you've won, but you have no idea what you've started. Some things are bigger than Helix, bigger than you or me. There are powerful people involved who don't take kindly to being exposed. Watch your back. A concerned former colleague. I stared at the message, reading it several times. It was clearly meant to frighten me, but the vague warnings only reinforced my suspicion that there was more to the patient path backdoors than simple corporate greed. Someone higher up, possibly outside of Helix entirely, was involved. I forwarded the email to Victoria in legal, adding a note. We might need to dig deeper. This suggests external players involved in the backdoor scheme. Her response came minutes later. Already on it, several similar warnings have come in through various channels. FBI is interested. I leaned back in my chair, contemplating this new development. What had started as personal revenge was evolving into something much larger and potentially more dangerous. But rather than feeling scared, I felt energized. If powerful people were worried about being exposed, it meant we were on the right track. By the end of the day, Helix Dynamics' stock had plummeted 68%, wiping out billions in market value. An emergency board meeting had been called, and industry analysts were predicting the company wouldn't survive the scandal. As I gathered my things to leave for the day, James stopped by my office. "Claire," he said, leaning against the doorframe, "I just got off the phone with the FBI's cyber division. They want to meet with you tomorrow to discuss the evidence you collected." I nodded, unsurprised. "I'll be ready." "This is becoming bigger than we anticipated," he continued, his expression concerned. "If what that email suggested is true, if there are powerful external players involved, things could get complicated." "They already are complicated," I pointed out. James studied me for a moment. "You know, when you first came to us with this information, I wondered about your motivations. Revenge seemed the obvious answer. But seeing you work these past few weeks, I've realized there's more to it than that. You genuinely care about doing the right thing." I smiled, not confirming or denying his assessment. The truth was, both things could be true simultaneously. I could want revenge and care about exposing wrongdoing. "Get some rest," James advised. "Tomorrow will be another long day." As I drove home that evening, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Satisfaction at seeing my plan unfold so perfectly. Vindication as Helix's stock price collapsed and clients fled. Curiosity about who the powerful people mentioned in the email might be. But beneath it all was something unexpected, a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. At Helix, I'd gradually become disillusioned as I'd witnessed ethical corners being cut in pursuit of profit. Now, at Meridian, I was part of something that felt meaningful, exposing corruption and protecting patient data. When I arrived at my apartment building, I found myself being unusually vigilant, scanning the parking garage for unfamiliar vehicles and checking over my shoulder as I walked to the elevator. The anonymous email had affected me more than I wanted to admit. Inside my apartment, I double-checked that the door was locked behind me, then went straight to my laptop. I needed to review my files one more time before meeting with the FBI tomorrow to ensure I hadn't missed anything important. As I settled in with a glass of wine and my notes, my phone rang. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello? Ms. Reynolds?" A man's voice, unfamiliar. "My name is Special Agent Daniel Carter with the FBI. I understand you'll be meeting with my colleagues tomorrow, but I wanted to give you a heads up that we've received some concerning intelligence. There may be a threat to your safety." My heart raced. What kind of threat? "We're not sure yet, but given the nature of the information you've exposed and the parties potentially involved, we're recommending basic precautions. Is there somewhere you could stay tonight besides your residence? Somewhere not obviously connected to you?" I thought quickly. "Yes, I have options." "Good. Use one of them. And Ms. Reynolds? Until we better understand who we're dealing with, it might be best to keep a low profile." After hanging up, I sat motionless for several minutes, processing this new reality. I wasn't just a whistleblower anymore. I was potentially a target. I made a quick decision, packed an overnight bag, and called a rideshare to take me to a boutique hotel downtown, one I'd never stayed at before. As I waited for the car, I sent a text to Victoria, letting her know about the FBI's warning and my change of location. 20 minutes later, I was checking into the hotel under a name that wasn't mine, paying cash, and requesting a room that didn't face the street. The desk clerk raised an eyebrow at my specifications but complied without comment. In my room, I double-locked the door, then pushed a chair against it for good measure. Paranoid, perhaps. But the day's events had shaken my confidence in normal security measures. I tried to focus on reviewing my files, But my mind kept wandering to the anonymous email and the FBI's warning. Who exactly had I angered with my whistleblowing? Helix executives, certainly. But the powerful people referenced in the email suggested connections beyond the corporate world. As I scrolled through the backdoor access logs one more time, something caught my eye, a pattern I hadn't noticed before. Several of the unauthorized access instances had targeted the medical records of high-profile individuals, politicians, business leaders, celebrities. It wasn't random data being harvested, it was specific information about specific people. This wasn't just about selling data, this was about gathering leverage. I was so absorbed in this new discovery that I almost missed the soft sound at my door, the subtle scrape of metal against metal that might be someone attempting to pick the lock. I froze, suddenly acutely aware of how vulnerable I was. The chair against the door wouldn't stop someone determined to get in. And I was 14 floors up, so the window wasn't an escape option. Moving quietly, I grabbed my phone and slipped into the bathroom, locking that door as well. I dialed 911 with shaking fingers. 911, what's your emergency? I'm at the Archer Hotel, room 1407, I whispered. I believe someone is trying to break into my room. I've received threats related to a federal investigation I'm involved in. Stay on the line, ma'am. Officers are being dispatched. As I waited, I heard the main door to my room open. Someone had gotten past the lock and the chair. Heavy footsteps moved through the room, methodical and unhurried. Whoever it was, they weren't worried about being caught. The bathroom doorknob turned slowly, testing the lock. I backed away until I hit the shower door, clutching my phone like a lifeline. Police are 2 minutes out, the 911 operator said, her voice seemingly too loud in the silent bathroom. The person on the other side of the door must have heard, because suddenly the doorknob stopped moving. After a moment, I heard rapid footsteps retreating, then the main door closing. 5 minutes later, police officers were taking my statement while hotel security reviewed their surveillance footage. The intruder had worn a baseball cap pulled low and had kept their face angled away from cameras. They had claimed to be hotel maintenance when questioned by a guest in the hallway. Professional job, one officer commented, not your average burglar. I didn't tell them about the patient path scandal or my role in exposing it. Instead, I gave them the contact information for Special Agent Carter at the FBI, saying only that it was related to an ongoing federal investigation. After the police left, the hotel manager offered to move me to a different room with additional security. I accepted, though I knew I wouldn't sleep much regardless of where I stayed, in my new room, with a security guard posted in the hallway, courtesy of the apologetic hotel manager. I called James. Someone just tried to break into my hotel room, I told him without preamble. There was a moment of stunned silence. Are you all right? Shaken, but unharmed. They ran when they heard me on the phone with 911. Isis, Claire. His voice was tight with concern. Where are you now? Are you safe? I'm at a different hotel room with security outside my door. I assured him. But James, I found something in the access logs that changes everything. The backdoors weren't just about selling data. They were targeting specific high-profile individuals, politicians, CEOs, celebrities. This looks like a blackmail operation. I heard his sharp intake of breath. You're sure? I can show you the patterns tomorrow, but it explains the powerful people reference in that email. This goes beyond Helix Corporate. Claire, listen to me carefully, James said, his voice deadly serious. Don't tell anyone else what you found, not tonight. We'll discuss this with the FBI tomorrow in a secure location. In the meantime, I'm sending private security to supplement the hotel guard. They'll be there within the hour. Is that really necessary? After what just happened, absolutely. These people clearly aren't playing by any rules we recognize. After hanging up, I sat on the edge of the bed, my mind racing. What had started as a mission of personal revenge had morphed into something far more dangerous than I'd anticipated. I wasn't just facing the wrath of a corporation I'd helped destroy. I was potentially up against a sophisticated blackmail ring with connections to powerful figures. For the first time since I'd been fired, I wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake in pursuing this path, but it was too late to turn back now. Artifact ID 2, Workplace Revenge Story. Type, Warstors, Text, Tour Markdown, Command, Update, Old, Stirs. After hanging up, I sat on the edge of the bed, my mind racing. What had started as a mission of personal revenge had morphed into something far more dangerous than I'd anticipated. I wasn't just facing the wrath of a corporation I'd helped destroy. I was potentially up against a sophisticated blackmail ring with connections to powerful figures. For the first time since I'd been fired, I wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake in pursuing this path, but it was too late to turn back now. New stir. After hanging up, I sat on the edge of the bed, my mind racing. What had started as a mission of personal revenge had morphed into something far more dangerous than I'd anticipated. I wasn't just facing the wrath of a corporation I'd helped destroy. I was potentially up against a sophisticated blackmail ring with connections to powerful figures. For the first time since I'd been fired, I wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake in pursuing this path, but it was too late to turn back now. Morning arrived after a night of fitful sleep. The private security team James had sent, 2 ex-military types with earpieces and impassive expressions, escorted me from the hotel to a waiting SUV with tinted windows. The theater of it all would have seemed absurd just 24 hours earlier, but after the break-in attempt, I was grateful for their imposing presence. "We're taking you to a secure location for the FBI meeting," the taller of the 2 guards informed me as we pulled away from the hotel. "Change of plans from the original office location," I nodded, clutching my laptop bag that contained all the evidence. "Does James know about this change?" "Mr. Renner arranged it," came the curt reply. The secure location turned out to be a nondescript office building in a business park outside the city. We were led through a service entrance and up a freight elevator to a conference room where James was waiting along with Victoria and 2 people I assumed were FBI agents. "Claire," James said, rising to greet me. "This is Special Agent Carter and Special Agent Rivera." I recognized Carter's voice from our phone call the previous night. He was younger than I'd imagined, maybe mid-30s, with closely cropped dark hair and alert eyes. Rivera was an older woman with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a severe bun. "Ms. Reynolds," Carter acknowledged. "I'm glad to see you're unharmed after last night's incident." "The hotel had surprisingly good security response time," I said, setting my laptop on the conference table. "But I doubt they were prepared for the kind of professionals you think are after me." "They weren't," Rivera said matter-of-factly. "You were lucky. Or they were just sending a message rather than actually intending to harm you." That thought hadn't occurred to me, and it sent a chill down my spine. A warning rather than a failed attempt. It made a certain kind of sense. "Let's get started," Carter suggested, gesturing to my laptop. "I understand you've discovered some patterns in the unauthorized access that suggest this is more than just a data harvesting operation." For the next 2 hours, I walked them through everything I'd found, the backdoors themselves, the pattern of targeted access to specific individuals' medical records, and the financial trail that led to offshore accounts. The FBI agents took notes and occasionally asked for clarification, but mostly just let me present the evidence. When I finished, Carter leaned back in his chair, exchanging a significant glance with Rivera. "This aligns with another investigation we've been pursuing," he said carefully. "A blackmail operation targeting political figures and business leaders with sensitive personal information. We hadn't connected it to Helix Dynamics before now." "Who's behind it?" James asked. Carter shook his head. "We don't know yet. But based on the sophistication and the targets, we believe it may involve foreign intelligence services working with domestic criminal elements." Victoria paled visibly. "You're saying Claire has potentially exposed a foreign intelligence operation?" "It's one theory we're pursuing," Rivera clarified. "But regardless of who's behind it, Ms. Reynolds is clearly in danger. We'd like to place you in protective custody until we can identify and neutralize the threat." "Protective custody," I repeated, the words not quite computing. "For how long?" "That depends on how quickly we can roll up this operation," Carter said. Could be days, could be weeks. The idea of disappearing into some safe house for an indefinite period while my life remained in limbo was distinctly unappealing. I'd just started rebuilding after being fired from Helix. A new job, new colleagues, a new sense of purpose. Now I was being asked to put all that on hold again. Is there no other option? I asked. I've just started at Meridian. I can't just vanish. James cleared his throat. What about a protection detail? Could Claire continue working while under guard? The agents exchanged another look. It's not ideal, Rivera admitted. But it's possible, with certain precautions. Ms. Reynolds would need to relocate to a secure residence, limit her movements to work and home, and accept 24/7 surveillance. A gilded cage, in other words, I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. A living cage is better than a coffin, Rivera replied bluntly. That effectively ended the debate. By the end of the meeting, it was decided that I would be moved to a secure apartment building where several federal witnesses were already housed. With round-the-clock protection from FBI agents posing as private security, I would be allowed to continue working at Meridian, but all other activities would be severely restricted. As we prepared to leave, Carter pulled me aside. There's something you should know, he said quietly. The break-in at your hotel room last night? Hotel security footage showed the intruder had a syringe. This wasn't just about scaring you. I felt the blood drain from my face. They were going to kill me? Or abduct you. Either way, these people are serious, so please, follow our security protocols to the letter. I nodded numbly, the full gravity of my situation finally sinking in. My revenge against Helix had seemed so righteous, so justified. I hadn't considered that I might be poking a bear far larger and more dangerous than a mere corporation. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. I was moved to my new, secure residence, a sterile, furnished apartment in a building with more security cameras than windows. My few personal belongings were brought over by agents who had swept them for tracking devices. My phone was replaced with a clean one, my laptop thoroughly examined and loaded with security software. Through it all, I continued working at Meridian, escorted to and from the office by agents posing as private security. My new colleagues were told I'd received threats related to the Helix whistleblowing, which was true enough, and that the company had hired protection for me. No one questioned the story. It seemed perfectly plausible given the high-profile nature of the scandal. And what a scandal it had become. In the week since the story broke, Helix Dynamics had lost 94% of its market value. The CEO and several top executives had resigned. The board had announced a comprehensive restructuring that industry analysts recognized as code for preparing to sell off the assets before declaring bankruptcy. Meridian, meanwhile, was flourishing. 17 of Helix's former clients had already signed contracts with us, with more in negotiations. Our stock price had surged 43%, and the company was on a hiring spree to handle the influx of new business. On paper, my revenge was complete. Helix Dynamics was in its death throes. I had a better position at a more successful company. The executives who had fired me were facing potential criminal charges. But instead of satisfaction, I felt a growing unease. The mystery of who was really behind the backdoor operation consumed my thoughts. The restrictions of my protective arrangement chafed more each day. And most troubling of all, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over, that something worse was coming. My instinct proved correct on the 10th day after the scandal broke. I was working late at Meridian, reviewing implementation plans for one of the newly acquired clients, when James appeared at my office door. "Claire, we need to talk," he said, his expression grave. "In private." He led me to his office and closed the door, checking that the blinds were drawn before speaking. "I received a call an hour ago," he said without preamble, "from someone claiming to represent the interested parties behind the patient path backdoors." My blood ran cold. What did they want? To make a deal. They want all the evidence you collected, every copy, every backup, in exchange for calling off whoever they've sent after you. You can't seriously be considering this, I said, studying his face with growing alarm. We've already given everything to the FBI. The evidence is out there. James wouldn't meet my eyes. The FBI doesn't have everything. You kept some insurance, didn't you? Something you held back? I hesitated. It was true. I'd maintained a separate set of files, the most damning evidence connecting the backdoor operation to specific individuals at Helix and beyond. I'd kept it as leverage, just in case. How did you know? I asked quietly. Because it's what I would have done, he replied. And because they specifically mentioned files the FBI doesn't have, files they're willing to pay $8 million to recover. $8 million, I repeated, the number striking me as oddly specific. That's quite a coincidence. James frowned. What do you mean? Helix claimed they fired me for budget cuts. They saved exactly $8 million by eliminating my department, or at least that's what they told shareholders. His eyes widened slightly as he made the connection. You think this is directly related to your firing, that they knew you were onto them even then? It makes sense, I said, thinking it through. I was leading the security audit that would have uncovered the back doors. They needed me gone before I could complete it. James ran a hand through his hair, a rare display of agitation from the normally composed CEO. This is bigger than we thought. If they're offering that kind of money, these files must be incredibly damaging. They are, I confirmed. They contain evidence linking the backdoor operation to specific board members at Helix, as well as connections to several political figures and a defense contractor. A defense contractor? Which one? I hesitated, suddenly uncertain how much I should reveal, even to James. Sentinel Systems. They're a cybersecurity provider for government agencies. James went very still. Sentinel Systems is a major client of Meridian's. They've been with us for years. The implications hung in the air between us. If Sentinel was involved in the backdoor operation, and they were also a Meridian client, what did that mean for us? For me? We need to tell the FBI about this call, I said finally. I already have, James assured me. But they've advised us to appear receptive to the offer. They want to use the exchange to identify and capture whoever's behind this. A sting operation, I said, with me as bait. You wouldn't be in any danger, he insisted. The FBI would control the entire situation. I laughed bitterly. Just like they controlled my hotel room, these people have already demonstrated they can get past professional security. Claire, James said, his tone softening. I understand your concerns, but this might be our best chance to end this, to get your life back to normal. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe there was a way out of this nightmare I'd created for myself, but something felt off about the whole situation. I need to think about it, I said, rising from my chair. And I should discuss this with Agents Carter and Rivera directly. James nodded. Of course. They're expecting your call. As I left his office, I felt the weight of suspicion settling in my stomach. Something wasn't adding up. How had these interested parties known to contact James rather than me directly? How did they know about my hidden files? And why offer exactly $8 million, the same amount Helix had supposedly saved by firing me? Back in my office, I called Carter using the secure phone they'd provided me. Ms. Reynolds. He answered on the first ring. I take it Mr. Renner has spoken with you. He has. Is this sting operation really the best way to handle this? We believe so. These people have gone to ground since the scandal broke. This is our first opportunity to draw them out. And you're confident you can protect me during this exchange? There was a slight pause. Nothing is without risk, Ms. Reynolds, but we'll take every precaution. That wasn't the unequivocal assurance I'd hoped for. I'd like to meet to discuss the details before I commit to anything. Of course, how about tomorrow morning at your secure residence, say 9 a.m.? That works, I agreed. After hanging up, I sat at my desk, trying to sort through my jumbled thoughts. Something was nagging at me, a detail out of place in this entire scenario. I pulled up the original evidence files I'd collected at Helix, specifically the access logs for the patient path backdoors. According to these logs, one of the most frequent users of the backdoor had accessed the system from multiple locations, including one IP address that I'd traced to Meridian Solutions. At the time, I'd assumed it was just a coincidence, perhaps someone using a VPN that happened to route through a server near Meridian's offices. But what if it wasn't a coincidence? I began digging deeper, cross-referencing the access timestamps with Meridian's visitor logs, which I now had access to as a director. There was a pattern. Whenever this particular backdoor user accessed patient path, there was a visitor at Meridian identified only as vendor meeting, with no specific company name. My heart raced as I followed this thread, pulling up calendar invites, security camera timestamps, even building access logs, all pointing to a single, inescapable conclusion. Someone at Meridian was involved in the backdoor operation. Someone with enough authority to bypass normal visitor protocols. Someone like James Renner. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Had I jumped from the frying pan into the fire? Was my revenge against Helix simply playing into a larger scheme orchestrated by Meridian? I needed to be sure before making any accusations. Using my director-level system access, I searched for any communications between James and Sentinel systems that predated my arrival at Meridian. There were hundreds of emails, most mundane business correspondence. But buried among them was a cryptic exchange from 2 years ago. Project Mirror can proceed as discussed. Helix remains unaware of our secondary objective. Payment structure as agreed. JR. The response? Excellent. Our mutual friend at the agency is pleased. Begin Phase 1 implementation at Patient Path. TS. Thomas Sullivan, CEO of Sentinel Systems. My hands shook as I forwarded these emails to my personal account, along with the other evidence I'd uncovered. Then I carefully covered my digital tracks, making it appear as if I'd been working on client implementation plans all evening. I needed to get out of the building immediately, but I couldn't let on that anything was wrong. My FBI escort was waiting outside my office, watching me through the glass wall. I forced a smile and began packing up my things as if calling it a night. Ready to head home? Agent Diaz asked as I emerged. Actually, could we make a quick stop first? I need to pick up some personal items from my old apartment, just a few things the other agents missed. Diaz frowned. That's not on the approved schedule, Ms. Reynolds. I know, but it's important, I insisted. Just 10 minutes, the building has security, and you'll be with me the whole time. She seemed to consider this, then nodded reluctantly. 10 minutes, and I clear the apartment first? In the car, I tried to appear calm while my mind raced through possibilities. If James was involved with the backdoor operation, then the FBI agents assigned to protect me might also be compromised. Carter had been surprisingly quick to suggest a sting operation that would put me at risk. And how convenient that he wanted to meet at my secure residence rather than an FBI office. When we arrived at my old apartment building, Diaz insisted on entering first, her hand resting on her concealed weapon as she checked each room. Finding nothing suspicious, she allowed me to enter. 10 minutes, she reminded me, taking up position by the front door. I went straight to the bedroom, pulling out drawers and collecting random items to maintain the pretense. But what I really needed was in the back of my closet, a go bag I'd prepared years ago after a stalking incident with an ex-boyfriend, cash, a prepaid phone, basic toiletries, and most importantly, a set of identification documents under a different name, a remnant of that paranoid period of my life that now seemed prescient rather than excessive. Everything okay in there? Diaz called out. Just finding the last few things, I called back, slipping the go bag into the larger tote I'd brought with me. Be right out, I emerged with the tote, now containing both the go bag and the random items I'd collected as cover. Thanks for this. I just needed some familiar things around me. Diaz nodded sympathetically. Protective custody isn't easy, but it's necessary. I know, I said, following her back to the car. I appreciate everything you and the other agents are doing. On the drive back to the secure apartment, I made a decision. I couldn't trust anyone at this point. Not James, not the FBI agents, not even Victoria from legal, who had seemed so genuinely committed to doing the right thing. I needed to disappear, to regroup and figure out who was really behind all this. But first, I needed to ensure the evidence I'd collected wasn't lost. If both Helix and Meridian were involved in this backdoor operation, the corruption ran deeper than I'd imagined. The truth needed to come out, regardless of what happened to me. When we arrived at the secure apartment, I thanked Diaz and went inside, where another agent was already stationed. I made a show of being tired, saying I was going to take a shower and go to bed early. The moment I was alone in the bathroom, I turned on the shower but didn't get in. Instead, I quickly composed emails to 3 recipients: a technology reporter at the Washington Post who had covered the Helix scandal extensively, the Attorney General's office, and a former colleague from my college days who now worked for a digital rights organization. To each, I sent copies of all my evidence, including what I'd discovered about Meridian's potential involvement. I scheduled the emails to send automatically at 8 a.m. the next morning, just before my scheduled meeting with Carter. Then I waited. I pretended to watch TV, made small talk with the agents, and eventually went to bed as if nothing was wrong. But I didn't sleep. I lay awake, listening to the movements of the agents in the apartment, waiting for my opportunity. It came at 3:17 a.m. The night shift agent, Martinez, received a call that required him to step outside the apartment to speak privately, something about a situation at another location. The moment he left, I moved. Grabbing my go bag from inside the tote, I slipped out of the bedroom window and down the fire escape. I'd chosen this particular bedroom in the apartment specifically because it had a fire escape access that wasn't visible from the street where the agents typically stationed their car. It was a 15-foot drop from the lowest platform to the alley below, painful but manageable. Once on the ground, I stuck to shadows and back streets, making my way to a 24-hour diner 12 blocks away. There, in a bathroom stall, I changed my appearance as best I could, cutting my hair short with a pair of scissors from my go bag, applying color-changing contacts, and putting on different clothes. It wasn't a perfect disguise, but it might be enough to avoid immediate recognition. Using the prepaid phone, I called for a rideshare under my alternate identity, directing it to take me to a bus station across town. From there, I bought a ticket to a city 3 hours away, paying cash. By sunrise, I was on that bus, watching the city recede behind me. My old life, both at Helix and at Meridian, was over. I had become a ghost, a whistleblower in hiding from forces I still didn't fully understand, but I had set the truth in motion. In a few hours, my emails would deliver the evidence to people who could use it to expose not just Helix's crimes, but potentially a much larger conspiracy involving Meridian, Sentinel Systems, and whoever the agency was that had been referenced in James's email. As the bus rolled down the highway, I found myself thinking about the title of an article I'd read about the Helix scandal just days earlier. They fired me for budget cuts. Then I watched them lose 8 Mandigasters. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had indeed watched Helix Dynamics implode, losing not just $8 million, but billions in market value. I had gotten my revenge, complete and devastating. But at what cost? I didn't know what would happen next. Whether I would ever be able to return to my real identity. Whether the people behind the backdoor operation would find me. Whether the evidence I'd sent would be enough to bring down the entire corrupt enterprise. All I knew was that the game had changed. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about survival. And about ensuring that the truth, whatever it might be, finally came to light. 3 months later, I sat in another nondescript diner in another nondescript town, sipping coffee and reading the news on a laptop that couldn't be traced to me. The headline made me smile, despite everything. Breaking: FBI arrests executives from Helix Dynamics, Meridian Solutions, and Sentinel Systems in massive data theft conspiracy. The article detailed how my evidence had triggered the largest cybersecurity investigation in FBI history, uncovering a complex operation that had been stealing and selling medical data for years. James Renner had been arrested while attempting to flee the country. Diane Frost and several other Helix executives were cooperating with authorities in exchange for reduced sentences. Most significantly, the agency mentioned in James's email had been identified. A covert division within a foreign intelligence service that had been using the stolen medical data to blackmail American officials and business leaders. I closed the laptop and paid for my coffee, leaving a generous tip as always. Outside, the small coastal town was just waking up, shopkeepers raising their shutters, early morning joggers nodding as they passed. No one here knew me as Claire Reynolds, the whistleblower who had brought down 2 major corporations and exposed an international espionage operation. Here, I was just Anna, the quiet freelance programmer who kept to herself. It wasn't the life I had planned. It wasn't the revenge I had envisioned. But as I walked along the shoreline, watching the sunrise paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, I found I didn't regret any of it. They had fired me for budget cuts and then lost everything. Justice, in the end, had been served. Not just for me, but for everyone whose privacy and security had been violated by their greed. Sometimes revenge doesn't look the way you expect it to. Sometimes it's bigger, messier, and more consequential than you could have imagined. Sometimes it changes everything, including yourself.